All right, let's talk to Elizabeth Simpkins. She's a regional underwriter at Inland Marine Transportation at Travelers Insurance. And this is a topic we've been covering a lot on backthetruckup.com, which is double brokering. Freight Caviar has done a ton of different articles on what it is, what goes on, what happens, how do you protect yourselves. Well, now we're going to talk to an expert on that subject. Elizabeth, thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's always good to be here.
Yeah, well, it's that time of year, holiday season, where all the good in people comes out, but so does the bad. Last time Travelers was on, we talked about the very obvious type of theft, right? Someone breaking into your trailer and taking your cargo. There's another type of theft that happens in freight that isn't as easy to quantify. It's a little bit more amorphous, but I think you're going to define us and tell us how to avoid it, and that is double brokering. Before we get into how double brokering works and all of that, what is double brokering, Elizabeth?
Yeah, so I guess I'll just put it as simply as I can. Double brokering is essentially when a carrier accepts a load from a freight broker to complete that shipment, but actually ends up running the load under a different carrier instead. And oftentimes it's being done without the original shipper's knowledge or the broker who actually gave the load. So it's a problem. Who has the freight is really the issue.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And there's a ton of effect throughout the supply chain. Shippers, brokers, unsuspecting motor carriers. It's universally frowned upon because we just mentioned you don't know who has the freight, who might be getting paid for the actual delivery. And it's not uncommon to see brokers and shippers that actually use language in their agreements that prohibit double brokering for those reasons. And aside from that, if that wasn't enough for you, there's liability and coverage problems too. So if you think about, we've talked about how freight brokers are not legally liable under CARMAC, but one way that they actually can be brought back into that liability argument is by improper vetting of a motor carrier. So now you have broker liability where there was originally none assumed. And the question of, is the carrier properly vetted? And in that same example, that could be a coverage problem. Those contingent cargo policies don't cover loss many times if the load was double brokered. So you got all that to think about, and the additional thing of a legal problem, potentially. If the brokering is being done by an entity that isn't authorized as a freight broker, it can lead to fines and even prison sentencing.
So this isn't something new, double brokering. It's not a myth. It's something we've all heard talked about. But how prevalent is the issue? How often is this happening? And how often is someone from your perspective uncovering it?
Yeah, it's not new. We're seeing it on the rise, though, now. There's a couple things contributing to that. The high demand we've seen in the marketplace, carriers are turning to rebrokering loads with more frequency. If they didn't have an available truck, but they accepted that load anyway, they're not going to just turn the business away. They're going to find another carrier to do it. And the problem, as we mentioned, is that that's happening without the shipper or the broker's consent. And if that someone else turns out to be a shell company, even if there's not a theft per se, but if the cargo is damaged while it's in that care, custody, and control of that carrier, that's a problem. The other thing that we see more frequently now is there's this sophistication that's developing with thieves that are bringing these double brokering scams just to the forefront. Technology is advancing. It's easier to create these fictitious networks of carriers, and you could see that situation where the freight broker is also a victim. It's pretty scary.
Now, when this topic comes up, there's always some person that raises their hand and yells, well, I co-broker all the time. What is the difference between co-brokering and double brokering?
I am so glad you asked. It's not the same thing, but it is often confused. Double brokering can sometimes be referred to as co-brokering or freight interlining. Try to make it sound less risky. But in a true co-brokering scenario, both co-brokers, there's two of them, have authorized broker authority. So that's one thing. There's agreements in place on both sides. So you've got an outlining there of roles, responsibilities, and liability. The shipper is often aware of what is going on. So it's very transparent and communication is open. So it's, quite different. The distinguishing factors, proper authority, consent of the parties, and co-brokering is legal. So it's common. It's more of a partnership between the brokers, and it's important to know those differences.
So then what would be a real world example of double brokering?
Sure, yeah. So something that we would typically see is if a shipper, reaches out to a freight broker, one they probably work with often, and they ask them to arrange for that transportation to be moved, the freight to be moved. Now, that freight broker probably has a good vetting process in place, and that's most likely why that shipper works with them. They know them, they trust them. So the broker vets their carrier, they tender the load, but what the broker isn't told is that the carrier they've hired may not have that truck available. Instead of pushing that business back to the freight broker and saying they can't do it, they turn around and broker it to another motor carrier. So you've got a couple problems right from the jump. Does that original broker have any restrictions in their agreements that prohibit that hired carrier from rebrokering it? There's a good chance. The second motor carrier that was hired, the one that's ultimately going to move it, that freight broker probably doesn't know they're involved. And would they have actually chosen that carrier? Would they have passed the vetting process of that original freight broker? And how good of a job did that motor carrier that was supposed to move the goods but gave it to someone else do in actually vetting? Did they do any vetting? If that process is weak at all, they actually could have hired a thief without knowing it. And the second thing to that point, that motor carrier may not have had broker authority to even move it. So you've got potential coverage issues, a legality issue. That's typically what we see.
Is there anything that carriers can do to protect themselves? So we know what the issue is. We know when it's a problem. What can I do now? How do I stop this from happening to me?
Yeah, so carriers, shippers, brokers, all of them, no matter what you do in the supply chain, always know who you're doing business with. Check, for shippers, checking the broker that they're considering to work with against FMCSA registration. And if you do this often, develop a network of brokers that you trust. And shippers can also make sure that they confirm the motor carrier to be used, make sure it matches who picks it up, and ensure that bill of lading clearly identifies the actual carrier who's going to take possession and control of the shipment. If that's not correct, if you see something strange, call the broker. The brokers, as part of their vetting process, they should be validating their carriers to be sure they're authorized, licensed, insured. And then carriers, making sure you're not a victim of this in some way. Read your rate confirmation carefully. If that confirmation requires you to check in as a different carrier than you are, probably hauling a double brokered load. Make sure that you don't see any strange billing information, an intermediary that you don't recognize. You can call your dispatch. And then all parties, again, check your contracts. The language in there, shippers and brokers both can put language in specific to prohibiting double brokering. So that's a good safeguard against that. Just be sure that you're reading those carefully.
Elizabeth, thank you so much. Have a great Thanksgiving, you and the Travelers team. Thanks for these tips on protecting ourselves from this terrible problem. We appreciate it.
You're welcome. Take care and happy Thanksgiving.
Take it easy.